Welcome to the Daily Allegory through Astrological Divination. Our magic motto of the day is let them watch, then watch them back. Today's story is about a ruthless cybercrime syndicate that has built a near-perfect pipeline for ruining lives. Patient stalking, covert device compromise, identity theft, and relentless extortion by grooming high-value targets through friendly proximity, then quietly hijacking their digital world with a blend of social engineering, counterfeit login traps, malicious app ecosystems, and off-the-shelf hardware Frankensteined with black market tech. They move in staged waves that fracture memory, scramble routines, and make victims doubt themselves until the takeover feels almost irreversible. Almost. And when anyone resists, the group weaponizes bureaucracy. How typical. False trails, legal smothering, and recruited accomplices to keep their success rate terrifyingly high and their double lives funded in luxury. But their machine begins to crack when they choose the wrong mark. A man engineered to be live bait, heir to an immense estate and secretly embedded into a powerful family after a long-dead look-alike was erased from the record, all as part of a clandestine government operation aimed at exposing a far larger apparatus feeding on the public. With experimental augmented reality systems, covert influence tech, and rumored capabilities that even insiders whisper about, the stakes explode from personal devastation to national integrity because if the trap fails, millions remain prey. But if it works, the predators finally get to step into the light just as they always wanted. Today's story is the Scorpio Moon Protocol. The night the sky arranged itself like a locked jaw, the moon sat in Scorpio, dark, watchful, hungry for what people hid from themselves. In another life, it would have been just another calendar square, another excuse for a late drink or a quiet drive. But tonight, the chart read like a threat. Moon trine Venus in the fourth, a softness in the home, a door left ajar. Moon square Mars in the fifth, desire that becomes weaponized. Moon trine Saturn in the seventh, a pact serious and binding. Moon opposition Uranus in the eighth, a shock in shared resources, a betrayal in the bloodstream. Moon trine Neptune in the ninth, a dream that travels farther than light. Moon sextile Pluto in the 10th, institutions shifting behind locked curtains. Moon square the North Node in the 11th, fate colliding with networks and crowds. And Moon conjunct Lilith in the 12th, the hidden feminine, the taboo, the predator wearing perfume. He stood alone in a house that didn't belong to him and belonged to him completely at the same time. The walls were too expensive to echo. The air smelled like money that had never really been touched by hands. Every frame held a face that wasn't his until it was. Years ago, a man had died quietly of an overdose, sealed away like a family shame no one wanted to look at too long. The replacement had arrived afterward. Neat as a puzzle piece, almost identical in appearance, sharing a resemblance that made relatives blink and then accept. Grief is a door that you can lock from the inside. He had been planted there, not by love, not by accident, and definitely not by fate. Though, fate took an interest once it realized what the plan actually was. It was a government operation wrapped in so many layers that even the people executing it didn't know where the bottom was. Clearances were rare, names were even rarer, and orders came like weather. You felt them, but you didn't see them. And for months he had lived as bait with a pulse. The criminals called themselves nothing. They didn't need a banner. They were a routine. A sequence refined by repetition until it became a ritual. High-value targets, they weren't even people to them. They were just a payday. They were vaults with breathing locks. Their favorite method wasn't brute force. It was intimacy. Their favorite tool wasn't even malware. It was loneliness. They sent in a friendly female when the target was a man. Someone with warm eyes and casual coincidences. Someone who made the world feel less sharp. She wasn't the knife, though. She was the hand that convinced you to lay your throat bare. She had shown up 3 weeks ago at the right cafe, in the right line, laughing at the right time. She asked a harmless question. She had offered harmless suggestions. And she had been close enough to him, later, that his phone had been out of his pocket just longer than it should have been. After that, the slow collapse began. At first, it was subtle. Small glitches that could be dismissed, a password that didn't work, a bank alert that almost looked real. A friend swearing they never got the email that he sent. The kind of misfires that could happen to anybody. The kind that make you blame yourself before you go around blaming the world out of paranoia. Then it became personal. Photos vanished from his camera roll like someone was trimming his memories. Calendar entries moved, messages appeared as read when he hadn't even opened them. Little stutters in reality timed so perfectly that it almost felt like fatigue, like stress, like old age. His handler called it the sequence. They don't hit you all at once. The handler had said, voice carried through a private channel that felt less like sound and more like thought. An experimental communication system that rode the edge of language. Telepathic, the briefings called it, though everyone pretended it was just advanced signal processing and bone conduction and 100 other safe words that made more sense logically. They introduced doubt first. Once you start asking, did I forget? They own the rest of you. He'd ask himself, did I forget, on day 4. And on day 7, a website he'd visited 1,000 times asked him to log in again. The page looked right. The colors were right. The little icon was right. He had stopped, though, because he was trained to stop. He stared at it until the warmth in his skull turned to ice, and across the street, a man on a bench lifted his head and smiled, almost like he knew the moment had almost happened. See, the criminals weren't just stealing money. They were stealing certainty. They were stealing the mental floor beneath a person and replacing it with shifting tiles. And underneath their glamour, their clean clothes, their curated lives, their vacations and parties and perfectly edited friendships, was a workshop of ugly, tiny little machines, little gears, a larger mechanism operating synchronistically. Cheap boards wired into clever shapes, tiny radios and improvised networks, borrowed tools repurposed into weapons, bits of hardware that didn't belong in civilian hands. They called it innovation. They called it hustle. They called it survival. They called it thriving. They had done it so many times they no longer felt the victims. They only felt the win. At night, the friendly woman lay beside him and traced patterns on his arm as if reading a map that only she could see. She told him stories designed to create trust, designed to make him confess small truths, childhood fears, favorite places, the kind of things people use to answer security questions without even realizing it. Her affection was Moon Square Mars in the 5th, romance, laced with pressure. The warmth came with the dare, the kiss came with the test, and he played his part, and oh, did he play it well. He let her think she was winning. He let her think the home was soft. That was the trap. Moon trine Venus in the 4th, comfort as camouflage. He would cook dinner. He let her leave a toothbrush. He laughed at her jokes. He let her fill the house with the illusion of belonging. Meanwhile, in the hidden layers, the operation watched. Not just through screens, through something stranger. The prototype augmented reality device was small enough to be nothing. An accessory, a lens, a piece of jewelry. When he wore it, the world acquired an extra skin. Faint overlays of signal strength, heat maps of activity, ghostly lattices of connectivity, invisible architecture made visible. Like seeing a city's plumbing through the sidewalks. At first, it made him nauseous. Then it made him furious. His own home wasn't empty. It was busy. Networks hummed where none should. Bluetooth pings from devices he never owned. Low-frequency chatter that wasn't even supposed to be there. It was as if somebody had parked a shadow next to his life and left the engine running. The criminals didn't just hack devices. They colonized environments. They turned personal space into hostile terrain. They made your living room feel like someone else's office. Moon opposition Uranus in the 8th, surprised in shared resources. Violations where you thought you had privacy, a jolt in the vault. And then the first extortion message arrived. It wasn't threatening at first. It was almost polite. A suggestion like probability itself. We know. We saw. We can prove it. Pay, and it stays quiet. Do it, and we won't hurt your kids. The proof was a photo of him asleep, taken from inside his bedroom. His stomach flipped. His pulse found his throat. For a split second, the world became a tunnel. Then the handler's voice touched the inside of the man's mind like a cold hand. Good, it said. They're committed. He sat up slowly, careful to keep his breathing even. Careful not to wake the woman. The moonlight painted her face, almost innocent. And that was the hardest part. How easy it was for evil to wear softness. He walked to the bathroom and stared into the mirror, sometimes forgetting who he was supposed to be. Not the name he wore, but the purpose, the mission, the tightrope between playing victim and becoming one. He had been trained under a Pisces stellium, not literally, but the energy fit. Mars, North Node, Mercury, and Sun in Pisces. Action, hidden underwater. Destiny moving through fog. Communication as a weapon of empathy. See, in Pisces, you learn the art of dissolving into roles. You learn to become what someone expects so they never notice the blade inside of your sleeve. But Pisces also drowns, and he could feel the water rising. The criminals were not alone. Some were above their operation, above the friendly woman, above the bench-smiling man, above the workshop of improvised tech. Something else existed, a larger machine. A system that fed on masses the way this group fed on individuals. The criminals were a tooth in a mouth that never stopped chewing. That was why the operation mattered. That was why the clearance was so rare. That was why the tools were so strange. They weren't trying to arrest a group. They were trying to map an organism. In the days that followed, the attacks escalated with the precision of theater. Bank accounts locked, social accounts flagged, emails sent from him that he'd never written, messages sent from him to people he'd never talked to in years, almost a decade plus, a whisper campaign seeded into his contacts, turning his reputation into something unrecognizable, messages to people in his circle, friends, co-workers. He watched it happen while living inside of it. Sometimes he wondered if the mission itself was a kind of madness. Moon conjunct Lilith in the 12th, you see. The hidden shadow pressing against the dream. Living in the dream, they say. Or living the dream. The more he saw, the more he questioned whether the world had always been this easily rewritten, and he'd simply been too late to notice. Then one night, he caught the friendly woman staring at him with a look that wasn't affection. It was calculation. She wasn't looking at his face, though. She was looking at his reactions to things, as if measuring timing, as if waiting for the right moment to spring the next step. In that instance, he saw her not as a person, but as a function in a system. And something inside of him hardened. Moon trine Saturn in the 7th, the part of the chart that promised. Make the pact. Keep it. Do what must be done, by any means. He made his decision. He stopped trying to survive the sequence and started steering it. He began feeding the criminals a curated version of his life. Just enough truth to be believable. Just enough chaos to lure them in from the distraction, from the hidden watchers. Just enough fiction to be useful. He left bait trails, fake logins, staged files, chaos, all kinds of chaos. Controlled leak of sensitive data that was sensitive only because he said it was. The criminals responded immediately, ate it up, took the bait. Their hunger wasn't subtle. Their confidence was absolute, though. They had run the scam too many times and never failed. And that was their weakness. Success creates laziness, and laziness creates patterns, and patterns can always be hunted. The augmented reality overlay lit up the night like a spider web. The house, his house, was threaded with signal. He watched the network swell when the criminals pushed. He watched the lattice tighten when they tried to pull. Moon tried Neptune in the 9th, intuition traveling beyond the room, beyond the state, into a wider ocean of their operation, the dream of a bigger picture. The recognition that the enemy wasn't just local, it was systemic. The handler sent him a single thought. Tonight's the night. It's time. Above the moon, and Scorpio held its breath. He stepped outside with his phone in his hand, letting the friendly woman see the tension in his shoulders, letting her believe the extortion had worked. He pretended to be cornered. He pretended to be afraid. The criminals loved fear. They ate that shit up. Fear made people predictable, though. He walked to the edge of the property where the estate's land began to fold into the woods, stopped beneath an old tree, held the phone up to his face like he was reading. In the AR overlay, the air around him trembled with an invisible intention. Then, from the darkness, a whisper of movement, a tiny click, a shift in the signal lattice. They were near. The friendly woman appeared behind him, her voice soft. "Are you okay?" Her tone was perfect, tender, concerned, a masterpiece of performance. He turned toward her, and for a moment he almost believed it. That was the cruelty of it. How good predators become at pretending. "I'm fine," he said. I just needed air." She touched his arm. You don't have to handle everything alone, you know." The words were so close to truth they could have been holy. But he saw the other layer, the one she didn't know he could see. The faint jitter of connectivity when her hand met his skin, the small spike of signal, the hidden handshake. He smiled at her. Then he spoke aloud the phrase his handler had instructed him to use. The trigger that sounded like nothing, a few words woven into casual speech. "Follow me now." And the world changed. The AR lattice snapped into a new geometry. Hidden nodes revealed themselves, a ring of presence, like a net tightening. Somewhere far above, the operation's more exotic tools. "Wake up, world." Hello again. Tools no one in the criminal circle had ever heard of, and would have laughed at if they had. It sounds psychotic. Moon sextile Pluto in the 10th, though, power and institutions. Influence in the hidden architecture of authority. Not justice as a courtroom, justice as an infrastructure. The friendly woman's eyes widened. She felt it before she understood. The softness on her face cracked. "What did you do?" She whispered. Almost whispered. He didn't answer. He watched her as if she realized she wasn't the hunter tonight. From the tree line, a figure stepped forward, a man with a bench smile from the cafe, another behind him, another. Their faces were calm, though. Their posture wasn't. They were used to control, used to victims who collapsed. They hadn't planned for bait that bit back. And then the handler's voice returned, not as a thought, but as a sound, coming from everywhere at once, as if the air itself had learned to speak. "Stand down!" The criminals froze. Confusion rippled across them, though. They didn't know where it was coming from. They were trying to locate the source. They were trying to interpret reality. They were doing what victims did. The friendly woman backed away, her hand sliding toward her pocket, toward something small and hidden. He saw it in the overlay, though, a device, lo-fi and cheap-looking, but effective. A piece of their workshop made portable, the kind of thing that wasn't supposed to ever exist outside the lab or be used on civilians. She raised it. He didn't move. Behind the criminals, the night flickered, like a mirage in reverse. For an instant, he saw a second layer of the world. Not the woods, but a grid. Not the sky, but a map of influence. Not the moon, but a red eye staring through everything. Moon squared the north node in the 11th, the collision between personal fate and collective networks. Between one life and the machine that fed on millions, the friendly woman pressed her thumb, press, but nothing happened. She pressed again, even harder. Panic flashed through her performance. She looked at the device like it had betrayed her, and it had. Because the operation had anticipated it. Because the bait had lured them into a controlled environment. Because, for once, the criminals were the ones too late to realize the sequence had already been set. She looked up at him, and in her eyes, he saw something unguarded. Not remorse, not even fear. It was rage. "You don't even know what you're touching," she hissed. "You don't know what's above us, who we work for." "I know," he said, quietly. "That's why I'm here." A shadow moved behind her, a second kind of presence, one that didn't belong to the criminals, one that didn't belong to the visible operation either. For a moment, the air got heavy. The handler's voice sharpened, eyes up. He looked and saw it. A faint distortion in the overlay, a ripple in the lattice, like something huge turning in the dark ocean above them. Not a drone, not a plane, something stranger. Something that didn't have a civilian name. The criminals weren't just thieves. They were connected. They were plugged into something that wanted the operation to fail. The stakes snapped into focus then. If the bait died here, the syndicate would continue. The larger machine would continue. Millions would remain prey to the systems that they didn't even understand. Their lives quietly rewritten in the background where they blamed themselves for forgetting. He felt the old family's wealth behind him like a vault door. He felt the dead man's face he wore like a mask. He felt the Pisces fog in his veins. The Aries fire in the next layer of his chart, though, started lighting up. Neptune, Saturn, Venus, and Chiron in Aries. Love and wounds and discipline and illusion all burning together into something that could either purify or destroy. He made a choice not to run, not to plead, and certainly not to negotiate. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and a friendly woman, and in the same motion, he lifted his hand, not to strike, but to reveal the small camera in his palm, the tiny lens that had been recording everything the entire time. Her face shifted. For the first time, she looked like someone who understood consequence. He whispered, just for her, "This is where your luxury ends." And then the world erupted. Not an explosion, not in gunfire, but in illumination. Signals collapsing, hidden nodes going dark, networks severing like tendons cut clean. The criminals' devices became dead weight, their confidence too, like in one single blow. The larger presence above them hesitated as if surprised. Looks like a win for the dark horse. And in that hesitation, the operation moved. No names, no badges, no hero speeches. Precision. Surgical precision. The moon in Scorpio watched the aftermath without blinking. The friendly woman sat on the ground, wrists bound, staring at him as if he were the first real thing that she had seen in years. "What are you?" she said. Voice raw. He thought of the dead man whose place he had taken. He thought of the family photographs. He thought of the handler's voice inside of his skull. He thought of the invisible machine that still existed somewhere, larger than this group, waiting to adapt. "I'm part of the story you never planned for, and couldn't if you tried," he said. In the distance, the estate house glowed warm and false and beautiful. Moon trine Venus in the fourth, comfort hiding claws. But now he could see the comfort for what it was, a stage, a tool, and a trap. And he understood the final truth of the Scorpio moon. People fear being watched. But they should fear something else. They should fear the moment the watcher becomes aware and decides to stare back. Like the moment God decides, enough is enough. We're going to end this with the invocation of the Scorpio Moon Protocol for protection, clarity, and the unmasking of hidden predators. Under the Scorpio Moon, keeper of secrets and breaker of lies, I stand at the threshold where shadow meets signal. Mercury, cleanse my words from distortion, let truth arrive unbroken. Venus, guard the soft places, home, heart, trust, let no charm become a chain. Mars, lend me nerve without rage, a steady hand, a clear spine. Saturn, set the boundary that cannot be bribed. Make my no a locked gate. Uranus, expose the sudden breach, the glitch, the mask slip, the hidden wire. Neptune, dissolve the fog of confusion. Let illusion fail to hold its shape. Pluto, bring the buried to the surface. Let the unseen network reveal itself in daylight. And Lilith, awaken the instinct that refuses to be fooled, the sacred refusal, the untamed warning. By moon blood and midnight silence, by the oath between breath and bone, I call for all false mirrors to shatter, all stage coincidences to unravel, all whisper campaigns to collapse into their source. Let watchers be seen as watchers. Let hunters be named as hunters. Let every hidden hand lose its grip. Let every stolen thread fall loose. Let every shadow path close behind me. I seal my mind from manufactured doubts. I anchor my memory in what is real. I walk forward with calm attention, not fear. And if eyes turn towards me in the dark, let my spirit turn back unblinking. Let them watch, then watch them back. Not with obsession, with clarity. Not with cruelty, but with truth. Not with panic, but with true power. So it is spoken beneath the Scorpio moon, so it is set. With the divine authority I contain, let us whisper this into law that underlies law. And so it is. Hopefully you found it entertaining. I'll see you in the next one.